The Industrial Revolution brought both great and terrible things to humanity. The telegraph brought instant communication over long distances. Mechanized weaponry brought about the submission of African and Indian tribes to their imperial conquerors. Electricity brought better lit homes, meaning the day would be longer. Better knowledge of radioactivity led to the discovery of several nuclear elements, resulting in atomic weapons. Another destructive thing, possibly the worst of them all, well, besides nukes, I suppose, was communism. Communism is second only to fascism in being universally hated across the globe. Most people today who believe in communism are either really uneducated or brainwashed. In its early years, communism sounded enticing for workers of all different nationalities, eventually leading to communist revolutions. Some countries weren't so lucky, however, and stayed capitalist. Today, we will be looking at the histories of communist movements in 3 different countries. First up is Japan. Japan is probably one of the last places you think of when you think of a communist country, and for good reason, because they hate it. For a decent portion of its history, Japan has been very right-wing and has been opposed to communism since day one. In 1922, the Japanese Communist Party was formed by some Christian socialists and anarcho-syndicalists. Of course, the Japanese government wasn't very fond of this, so the movement was very soon forced underground after being outlawed by the Japanese government in 1925. After World War II, the party was re-established legally and still exists today, with a decent bit of support, too. Not enough, mind you, but it's a decent portion of the parliament. After the war, Japan and its occupiers, mainly the United States, began the Red Purge, where multiple communists and suspected communists were fired from essential jobs such as government jobs, teaching jobs, and business jobs. The beginning of the Korean War in 1950 further heightened the Red Purge. Joseph Stalin even condemned the JCP for not using the Red Purge as an excuse to launch a revolution. The JCP then split into 2 parts, the peaceful part and the Soviet-approved revolutionary part known as the 1951 Platform. The platform began organizing farmers into guerrilla militias, which is never a good sign. Japan cracked down on the militias, handing out life in prison to anyone who was found to be a member of the platform. In 1960, the U.S. and Japan signed the Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the United States and Japan, which allowed the U.S. to build military bases in Japan. Many Japanese nationalists, as well as anyone who just didn't like the U.S., were not happy about this treaty, and so they began to riot. The Anpo protests were the largest in Japanese history and resulted in the Haggerty Incident, where Press Secretary James Haggerty and U.S. Ambassador to Japan Douglas MacArthur II, nephew of the first arrogant jerk, drove a car through a crowd of Anpo protesters. The protesters climbed on top of the car and smashed its windows, causing an international incident that briefly soured relations between Japan and America. The protest would eventually die down. The JCP made smart decisions during the Sino-Soviet split. They condemned the Soviet invasion of Czechoslovakia, meaning that they didn't believe in using force to instill communism. They also distanced themselves from China, meaning that the public didn't associate them with the Great Leap Forward. This neutrality is what allowed them to survive to this day. America isn't exactly known for being communist, but like most countries, it still had its own communist party. During the Cold War, Americans were kind of stuck because they couldn't outlaw communism because of the Constitution, but they also weren't fans of it. The Communist Party of the United States of America, or CPUSA, was founded in 1919. It quickly stole around 20,000 supporters from the Socialist Party of America, who were being criminally prosecuted for their anti-war protests across the country. And then the Great Depression happened. There's nothing poor people in the 20th century like more than unionizing and communism, and the U.S. was no different. Thousands flocked to the CPUSA for support and aid via their International Workers' Order. When the Spanish Civil War broke out in 1936, many CPUSA members went to Spain as international volunteers, fighting on the side of the Spanish Republic. It was at this time that many members of the CPUSA looked up to the Soviet Union, admiring their early and staunch opposition to fascism. Once World War II started, the party did a complete 180 from opposing fascism to being anti-war. Some things never change. They also criticized Neville Chamberlain and Edouard Daladier for mobilizing their forces, but refused to criticize FDR because it would be detrimental to American communism, instead opting to criticize his advisors. You just can't make this stuff up. When the Soviets invaded Finland and began pressuring the Baltic states, the CPUSA justified these actions for Russian security reasons. Some things never change. The head of the Comintern Pact, Georgy Dimitrov, demanded that the party denounce the Roosevelt administration. The party complied. After the war, America started to crack down on communism with the McCarthy trials and the Red Scare. The CPUSA's support plummeted in the late 40s and all through the 50s. Unlike the Japanese Communist Party, the CPUSA doesn't have as much of a standing in American politics, but then again, neither does any third party. Please subscribe. I had to go to the CPUSA's website for this. I hear you. Germany did become communist. I'm talking about the communist movement in the Weimar Republic. You see, in its early days, communism had only one brand, the standard, Marxism, before it split into more branches than Protestantism. After Stalin came to power, he changed Marxism to fit his ideas, creating Stalinism. Stalinism was the idea that was forced upon Eastern Europe at the end of World War II. Politics lesson aside, let's talk about Germany. The Social Democratic Party, that's just its name, was one of the world's most successful leftist parties at its height. The party covered all leftists from center-left to anarcho-syndicalism. In 1914, after World War I broke out, some moderate party members wanted to support the war, while many radicalists were against it. The radicals would then split off and form their own party, the Communist Party of Germany. After the war, the party was at risk of splitting again after infighting between moderate and radical factions. Sound familiar? Some were in support of Stalin's policies, while some were in support of the policies of Grigory Zinoviev, a rival of Stalin. I think you know where this is headed. Zinoviev was executed by firing squad in 1936. Why did I laugh at that? Party members more loyal to the Politburo were elected shortly after, and the party formed the United Front, a coalition of leftist parties who all worked together in elections. Stalin would later align the party's interests with his own, starting a period known as the Third Period. Really creative there, Stalin. The party would later form many armed militias and began fighting bloody battles with Nazis in the streets. Now, if you know literally anything about history, you know what happens next. One of Hitler's first acts after he came to power was to outlaw communism. Many communists were arrested and had to provide room and board in their skulls for 57mm bullets. Now you may be thinking, for how not Stalinist those guys are, they were pretty Stalinist, and you're right. However, this alliance wouldn't last. After East Germany was established, many disagreeable party members were imprisoned or mysteriously disappeared. In 1968, the party was forcibly merged into the Socialist Unity Party, forming the KPD. The KPD ruled over East Germany with an iron fist until 1989, when the two halves were finally reunited at the end of the Cold War. In conclusion, communism sucks.